Well, good viewers and listeners well, here it is, the video I've been talking about for most of the past year. It's finally time to address something very near and dear to my heart. Porn! Oh wait, that was the last video. I mean Gears! Specifically, what we're going to examine in this video is how Gears became one of the biggest selling games of the last console generation, and where it stands in today's gaming landscape. I'll be giving my thoughts on the future of the franchise and what I'd like to see from Gears 5 in a forthcoming video. Now, with that out of the way, let's dive right in and get to it! Post-haste! Released in 2006 and backed by a very memorable advertising campaign, the first Gears of War game proved to be a runaway success and brought the cover-based shooter into the mainstream. It influenced an entire genre of games like Bulletstorm, Binary Domain, and whatever the f*** this is. It was followed in 2008 by Gears 2, which achieved numbers in terms of sales and player count that the series has been unable to match since, with each subsequent release seeing diminishing numbers, particularly when it comes to active players. As a big fan of the series, having played the shit out of every game in the franchise, yes, even Judgment, I wanted to know why. Why did such a revolutionary game that was a perennial Game of the Year contender become just another middle-of-the-road shooter? Why did a game that was such a cornerstone of the last console generation fall out of favor with the general gaming public when it had, for the most part at least, put out quality titles? Well, after digging through nearly 12 years worth of articles, statistics, and shit posts, I've found at least some of the answers. So what do you want first? The easy answers or the more complicated ones?
You know I like my dessert first.
Alrighty then. The reason for the lower sales, I believe, can be attributed to a combination of two things. An unconventional, poorly received game to end off the last console generation, and a complete shitting of the bed by Microsoft at E3 2013 that effectively doomed them to second best for this entire console generation. Gears being an Xbox exclusive, its success is intrinsically linked to that of the console, and the console has simply not sold well in comparison to the last generation Xbox. It's not just Gears suffering from this problem, as even cross-platform titles like Call of Duty haven't sold nearly as well on Xbox One compared to the last generation version of those games. So the lower sales volume isn't reason for alarm bells on its own.
Give me the damn veggies.
Oh God, who writes that crap? While people are still clearly buying the game, it's equally clear that they ain't buying it for the multiplayer, Tony. Whereas Gears used to battle COD and Halo over top spot for most played game on Xbox 10 years ago, nowadays it can't even crack the top 20. Shockingly, not 3 months after launch, Gears 4 had already fallen to 17th most played. 17th! That's a pathetic statistic for a flagship title, and a long way off the player count Gears used to put up in its heyday. But how many people is it exactly? Well, Microsoft doesn't release hard numbers on player count anymore because they're probably nowhere near what they used to be, but with the help of a crack team of accountants, I've deduced that there's well under 100,000 people still playing the game. While that might sound like a lot, it's a paltry 3% of the total customer base, which is far lower than other AAA franchises, and I suspect the actual number is well below 50,000 in reality. But why? Why did so many people abandon the game so quickly? Well, answering this is a bit more complicated than the sales question, but after reading countless comments on forums, particularly this post on the general Xbox subreddit which asked why people stopped playing Gears 4, I believe it can be summed up in 5 main reasons. Microtransactions, skill gap, the devs not listening to the players, lack of variety, and lack of innovation. I've already made a video about what microtransactions have done to the game, but let's take a closer look at the other 4 in no particular order. Number 1! Zero innovation! For what was such a groundbreaking first entry, the series has done little to innovate since, particularly when it comes to the multiplayer. While Versus is likely extremely thrilling for new players, those of us who've been around for a while have had this same exact experience for over 10 years now, and I, for one, was tired of this song and dance a long time ago. I'm not exaggerating when I say this is almost identical to the multiplayer found in the first game. Hell, half the maps in Gears 4 are recycled from Gears 1. The only noteworthy change to the formula over the 4 main installments is the ability to pull people out of cover. Wow, game-changing! By comparison, look at how much the games Gears used to compete with have changed over the years. Not necessarily always for the better, but at least they tried new things. While I can't speak for everyone, I've seen a lot of folks voice similar opinions in the past, and the high sales to low player counts speak to a community who's still interested in the franchise on the whole, but largely doesn't stick around for the multiplayer. When Gears 5 was announced a few months ago, I read an article that summed up my feelings perfectly. I haven't been able to locate the article again since, so I may be misquoting the author a bit, but he said something along the lines of, "If the Gears 5 multiplayer is another 10-person shotgun fest on small maps with waist-high walls, you can count me out." Number 2! Lack of variety. Gears has always been kind of old school in its approach. Everyone starts with the same base guns, there are power weapons dotted around the map, and there aren't any classes. But unlike similar games like Halo, which have multiple playstyles built around a few core weapons and a variety of different maps, Gears doesn't offer up so many options. To put it into perspective, there's only one viable default weapon, one effective playstyle, and one type of map. I'm talking, of course, about the Nasher, wall bouncing, and squarish arenas with the aforementioned waist-high walls. So if you're coming from a modern shooter which has a lot of depth, you're probably going to get bored pretty quick with the lack of options on offer. Nearly every map plays exactly the same. All are single level, offering no verticality, and they're all symmetrical, so if you just wanted to check out the layout of the map, you've seen everything by the midway point. And nearly every match plays out the same way. A mad dash for the power weapons at the start, before settling into a wall-bouncing Nasher fest. Listen, I know hearing that may upset some hardcore Versus players, but I think you're missing my point. I'm not saying make radical changes and remove the core Versus style of multiplayer entirely the way Judgment did. I'm saying add some additional options on top to attract new players. New playlists, different modes, do something to shake it up for God's sake. As it stands now, the devs are so committed to keeping the status quo that when people started getting good with the Hammerburst, they removed it as a default gun and made it a pickup weapon. Oh, fuck. Number 3! Major skill gap. Because of the small teams and lack of options in playstyle, this game is very unwelcoming for new players. Unless you have a team of 4 seasoned vets carrying you, you'll likely have to suffer through a long period of frequent deaths before you become competitive. Much longer than the majority of other shooters. Because of this steep learning curve, Gears is not simply the type of game you can put down and come back to in a few weeks. So it really only caters to the hardcore crowd nowadays. Back in the days of Gears 1 and even through most of 2's lifespan, the average player didn't use advanced movement tactics that are common now, like wall bounce canceling, which I believe is probably the reason why it doesn't have the casual player base it used to. Most of the people I played Gears with back in the day also played COD, Halo, and Battlefield, and they were pretty good at all of them because they all played similarly. In this modern era of online gaming, if you only play Gears once in a while, you'll get smoked by the dudes who play this game exclusively and have the movement skills mastered. If you've got 3 other games vying for your attention, you're probably not going to devote much time to the one game stomping your nuts in every time you boot it up, which explains why none of those people I mentioned ever play Gears anymore. In this day of Steam sales with decent games for $1, I don't want to play a game that punishes me for playing something else for a couple of days. If I wanted to experience an hour of torturous pain, I'd go see my dominatrix! Number 4! The developers simply do not listen. Now, I could have made this into 2 separate points, with the other being performance issues like inconsistent damage, hit detection, and lag, but seeing as all those things have been present since the first f***ing game, I think it speaks to the bigger problem here being the devs do not listen to the fan base. This is especially problematic when it comes to how closely they pay attention to the suggestions of the pros in their teeny tiny, microscopic, ever-dwindling esports scene. Why they shun the vast majority of the player base who support their game in favor of an esports segment whose major events can't even draw as many viewers as a gutter-level titty streamer is beyond me. The attempt to force this game into the esports scene is likely also the reason behind the lame map design, among other things. And look, if you enjoy Gears esports, don't get your panties in a bunch, okay? The numbers don't lie. It's simply not working, and catering to it is to the detriment of the overall game, so when they give up on it, we will all benefit. But I'm not going to hold my breath. The devs of this franchise have historically never been very reactive, or good listeners for that matter. Epic was bad, but I'd wager the new guys are even worse. Someone at the Coalition once replied to a tweet about making the shotgun and the Lancer more equal with, "If you don't like shotguns, Gears of War probably isn't the game for you." Telling your customers to essentially go f*** themselves when they give you honest feedback has never been a good business model. Just ask the deal with it guy. And that's it! While putting your head in the sand or taking a "if you don't like it, then don't play it" stance may be the easy solution, it's not a good long-term strategy if you want to keep the versus component healthy. Call of Duty has the opposite problem with low player counts in single player, and that series has completely dropped the campaign mode in its next iteration. With such low population numbers in Gears multiplayer, it's not outlandish to think that they may forego the multiplayer in the future entirely, especially if funding becomes tight, given how much they blew pushing this stupid esports crap. Judgment showed that completely changing the formula isn't the answer. So what is? How do they turn around the fortunes of the franchise, particularly when it comes to keeping people engaged in the multiplayer? Well, I think I have at least some of the answers. However, you'll have to wait until part 2 for that, because it's past my bedtime and I'm getting sleepy. I don't know about you, but if I don't get my 23.5 hours, I'm cranky all day. Till next time, fare thee well, f***ers! If you enjoyed the video, please leave a comment and a like. It helps us get more exposure on the YouTubes. And while you're at it, why not subscribe? We put out shit like this every week. Circle jerk!